Morning, welcome to Kingsport News Hour for the third day in the first month, the 17th year of Chungi. Tim Elder sitting in for the second king of Chungu, Pyongyang Moon, and let's take a look at what's going on around the kingdom right now in Chongpyeong, Tennessee. It's 54 degrees and it looks like there's light rain there, which is going to continue for at least an hour, it says. 54 degrees now, getting up to 70 degrees today. A shower places this morning, otherwise mostly cloudy and warm. Tonight, low of 56, cloudy with widely separated thunderstorms late. So it looks like some nice spring weather again there in Chongpyeong. At the True Father's hometown in the Cheongju, North Pyongyang Province, Korea, 32 degrees, mostly clear. Increasing amounts of clouds tonight, getting down to 26. Tomorrow, low clouds followed by some sun, high of 52. At the Cheongju Palace in northeast Pennsylvania, colder there than it is in Father's hometown, 29 degrees and clear right now. Areas of freezing fog this morning, cloudy. Watch for icy spots, high of 40 today. Tonight, low clouds getting down to 32. At the Liberty Rock RV Parking Campground in Limestone County, Texas, mostly cloudy and 66. My goodness, getting up to 83 today. Breezy this morning, otherwise very warm. Periods of clouds and sunshine. Tonight, getting down to 51, mainly clear early, then areas of low clouds forming and cooler. At the Suncheon Palace in Korea, 44 degrees and cloudy right now, and getting down to 28 tonight, becoming clear during the night, and then tomorrow, hazy sunshine, high of 61. At the Gunma Palaces in Japan, 33 and clear, and mainly clear tonight, getting down to 27. Tomorrow, some sun, then turning cloudy, high at 51. Guangzhou, Guangdong, China, currently 71 and clear. Mainly clear tonight, low of 59. Tomorrow, very warm with a hazy sunshine and a high of 79. All right, let's go to, that's right, Mother's Word. And let's see here. Let's see here. I didn't bring this up previously. Okay, let me pick a random page there. Okay, we're in, where are we now? We're in the book on the true family and chapter 7, the love of a true husband and true wife. And here we have a quotation from Blessed Family, the book Blessed Family, page 970. The relationship that is called husband and wife is not limited to itself. You should know that it represents heaven and earth. So they have, okay, wow. So we're not just forming families for ourselves, but we're forming families to serve a much, much higher and broader purpose. Praise God for that lesson this morning. All right, let's go see what's going on around the world. And today, President Trump is holding his first meeting of the Board of Peace. And let's see if I can show you this. So I want to go to Al Jazeera for this story. The Western press is mainly, pointing out that some of the allies are not joining and so forth and so on, and they focus on that, trying to discredit President Trump's effort as much as possible. Al Jazeera seems to be giving the most sort of honest, I think, report this morning. Analysts say Trump will seek to show Gaza progress at controversial board meet, but pressure on Israel needed for gains. This is, of course, Al Jazeera is an Arab publication, so we can expect that to be the headline. United States President Donald Trump is set to hold his first Board of Peace summit in Washington, D.C., an event where the U.S. leader likely hopes to prove a recently launched panel can overcome skepticism, even from those who signed on in support, in the face of months of Israeli ceasefire violations in Gaza. The summit on Thursday comes nearly 3 months to the day since the UN Security Council approved a U.S.-backed ceasefire plan amid Israel's genocide in Gaza, which included a 2-year mandate for the Board of Peace to oversee the devastated Palestinian enclaves, reconstruction, and the launch of a so-called International Stabilization Force. So this Board of Peace is supposed to oversee the reconstruction of Gaza and also to launch a so-called international stabilization force. Disquiet has surrounded the board since the November Security Council vote, with many traditional Western allies wary of the U.S. administration's apparent wider ambitions, which some have viewed as an attempt to rival the United Nations in a Trump-dominated format. I think they're right. I think maybe that's actually necessary. The United Nations could use some competition, and I doubt that it will be able to stand up to that competition when that competition comes. We'll see how it works out, though. Others, including countries that have already signed on as members, having raised concerns about the board's fitness to effective, meaningful change in Gaza. Several regional Middle East powers have joined the board, with Israel becoming a late and to some disconcerting addition in early February. As of Thursday's meeting, the board still has no Palestinian representation, which many observers see as a major obstacle to finding a lasting path forward. What exactly does Trump want to get out of this meeting? Youssef Munayyer, the head of the Israel-Palestinian program at the Arab Center in Washington, D.C., questioned. I think he wants to be able to say that people are participating, that people believe in his project and in his vision and in his ability to move things forward, he told Al Jazeera. But I don't think that you're going to see any major commitments until there are clearer resolutions to the key political questions that so far remain outstanding. To be sure, the Board of Peace currently remains the only game in town for parties interested in bettering the lives of Palestinians in Gaza, Munayyer explained, while simultaneously remaining extremely and intimately tied to the persona of Donald Trump. That raises serious doubts over the board's longevity in what is likely to be a decades-long response to the crisis. Regional players that have a serious concern over the future of the region and concern over the genocide have no choice but to really hope that their participation in this Board of Peace allows them to have some leverage and some direction over the future of Gaza in the next several years, Munayyer said. He assessed the greatest opportunity for member states who understand the challenges and understand the context would be to focus on what realistically can be achieved in the time period, to focus on the immediate needs and address them aggressively. That includes health infrastructure, freedom of movement, making sure that people have shelter, pushing for an end to ceasefire violations, to name a few, he said. At least 72,063 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza since October 7, 2023, with 603 killed since the October 11, 2025 ceasefire went into effect. Nearly the entire population of 2.1 million has been displaced, with more than 80% of buildings destroyed. It's interesting, isn't it, how they sort of paper over this date of October 7, 2023. I mean, well, what happened on that day? Why is that an important date? You would think, well, is this just a random date at all? No, that's when, of course, the Hamas invaded. Hamas soldiers invaded Israel and massacred quite a lot of people on Israeli territory. Most were Israelis, but some were also foreigners there. And so Israel began its retaliation on October 7th. Right? For his part, Trump, who has previously envisioned turning Gaza into a Middle East Riviera, struck a positive tone ahead of the meeting. In a post on his Truth Social account on Sunday, Trump touted the unlimited potential of the board, which he said would prove to be the most consequential international body in history. Trump also said that $5 billion in funding pledges would be announced toward the Gaza humanitarian and reconstruction efforts, and that member states have committed thousands of personnel to the International Stabilization Force and local police to maintain security and peace for Gazans. He did not provide further details. Meanwhile, Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who is a member of the panel's so-called Gaza Executive Board, unveiled the clearest vision yet of Washington's master plan for Gaza in January. The plan, assembled without any input from Palestinians in Gaza, outlined gleaming residential towers, data centers, seaside resorts, parks, sports facilities, predicated on the erasure of the enclave's urban fabric. At the time, Kushner did not say how the reconstruction plan would be funded. He said it would begin following full disarmament by Hamas and the withdrawal of the Israeli military, both issues that remain unresolved. So as the U.S. administration stargazes over sweeping construction plans, stargazes, so Al Jazeera is not very, they're not really expecting very much, are they? Yeah. It is likely to face a starker reality when it meets with a collection of the 25 countries that have signed on as members, as well as several others that are sending observers to the meeting, according to Anil Shalin, a research fellow in the Middle East program at the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. Any progress to show the board's proof of concept would all but surely require asserting unilateral pressure on Israel, she noted. Trump is hoping to have countries back up his claim about the $5 billion to get actual commitments on paper, Shalin told Al Jazeera. This is probably going to be challenging because especially the Gulf countries have been very clear that they're not interested in financing another reconstruction that's just going to be destroyed again in a few years. Israel's decision to join the board, which Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had initially opposed, has piqued concerns about further influence over U.S. policy. An act of good faith by the U.S. to advance a more lasting peace could be the inclusion of a Palestinian official on the board, Shalin added. So who is this? Okay, so this is the executive board comprises 8 members, including real estate developers, businessmen, and politicians. Donald Trump is chairman for life. It's always dangerous, to take on a position with a title chairman for life, because then automatically you're sort of daring people to shorten your life. Jared Kushner is there, and Mark Rowan, Apollo Global Management, and Witkoff, special envoy to the Middle East, is there. Robert Gabriel Jr. apparently is camera shy. I don't know. he must be one of these guys that stays out of the way of all cameras. Tony Blair is still there, former UK Prime Minister. We haven't heard from him at all recently. And also Ajay Banga, president of the World Bank, is there. Marco Rubio. She proposed widely popular Palestinian political prisoner Marwan Barghouti, who is continuing to serve consecutive life sentences in Israel, as a possible candidate. His release, she said, could be an example of an area where Washington could use its leverage to immediate effect. In the shorter term, interested member states are largely waiting for the security situation to resolve. Israel violates the ceasefire daily and moves the yellow line, Shalin said, referring to the demarcation in Gaza behind which Israel's military was required to withdraw as part of the first phase of the ceasefire agreement. Indonesia's government has said it is preparing to commit 1,000 troops to a stabilization force, which could eventually grow to 8,000, but any deployment would likely remain delayed without better ceasefire guarantees, she said. It's still an active war zone, Shalin added, so it's very understandable that even Indonesia, which has hypothetically said it would contribute troops to the stabilization force, is likely going to say, we're not actually going to do that until the situation is stable. Ensuring an actual ceasefire is enforced, including creating accountability mechanisms for violations, remained by far the most critical task for the board's inaugural meeting, according to Laureate Nathan, the director of the mediation program at Kroc Institute for International Peace Studies at the University of Notre Dame. All sorts of think tanks, peace studies and all sorts of peace in people's names. Trump's Board of Peace is not going to be able to play a meaningful reconstruction role in the absence of stability in Gaza, and stability requires adherence to the ceasefire, he told Al Jazeera. So I guess, anyway, people are able to draw a salary from these places. That's amazing. The next key step in a major development that could come from Thursday's meeting would be a commitment of troops, although Nathan noted any deployment will still likely be deadlocked until a voluntary Hamas disarmament agreement is reached. On the face of the situation, Trump would appear increasingly incentivized to use Washington's considerable leverage over Israel to foster a stability in Gaza that the president has closely aligned with his own self-image. After all, Trump and his allies have regularly portrayed the U.S. president as the peacemaker in chief, repeatedly touting his success in conflict resolution, even if facts on the ground undermine the claims. Trump has been vocal in his belief that he should be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Still, Trump's motivation is multifold, Nathan explained. Does he care about peace? I think he does. Does he want to be a peace broker? Yes. Does he genuinely want the Nobel Peace Prize? Yes. On the other hand, he is performative. It's never quite clear how much of it is serious for him. He added, the further problem is that personal interests are always involved when Trump is doing these things. Both Washington's Western allies and experts in conflict resolution have scrutinized what appears to be the yawning scope of the Board of Peace far beyond Gaza, the Gaza purview approved by the UN Security Council last year. A widely reported founding charter sent to invited countries did not directly reference Gaza, as it took digs at pre-existing approaches to peace building that foster perpetual dependency and institutionalize crisis rather than leading people beyond it. Instead, it envisioned a more nimble and effective international peace-building body. Critics have further questioned Trump's singular and indefinite role as chairman and sole veto holder, which largely undermines the principles of multilateralism intended to be enshrined in organizations such as the UN. They have argued that the structure fosters a transactional approach both in dealings with the US government and Trump as an individual. Richard Gowan, the program director of global issues and institutions at the International Crisis Group, there's a whole list of these groups and institutes and everything, isn't it? But anyway, Al Jazeera has contacted them all, said those concerns are unlikely to subside anytime soon. Still, he did not see that precluding European countries from supporting the board's effort if it is able to make meaningful progress. I think in practical terms, you will see other countries trying to support what the board is doing in the Gaza case while continuing to keep it at arm's length over other issues, he said. Thursday's meeting could indicate the Board of Peace's dynamic and tone going forward. If Trump uses his authority under the charter to order everyone around, block any proposals he doesn't like, and run this in a completely personalistic fashion, Gowan said, I think even countries that want to make nice with Trump will wonder what they're getting into. If Trump shows his mellower side, if he's actually willing to listen, in particular to the Arab group and what they're saying about what Gaza needs, if it looks like a genuine conversation and a genuine contact group, he said, that won't erase all the questions about the board's future, but it will at least suggest that it can be a serious sort of diplomatic framework. Okay, that looks like that's the end. Okay. So today, this Board of Peace is having its first meeting, and President Trump, of course, will be there. And we will see what it's going to be like. And I guess we'll be covering this tomorrow. The results of it should be out by tomorrow. We'll be looking at it then. Certainly hope that it can work out, that it can sort of be a positive force in God's providence, and certainly peace between Israel and Arabs in the Middle East is certainly something that God wants to happen. So we will see. We'll see. I guess, like many other people, we're watching this to see what President Trump is going to bring to that table, and what his reaction will be when other people propose things that he may not necessarily agree with 100%. We'll see what happens with that situation. You know, it could just blow up in his face today. That's possible. Or people could, at the end of the day, could say, wow, okay, maybe this is something that can actually work. People at the United Nations, I'm sure, are wary. They're afraid that they're going to be displaced. But you got to figure out what has the UN done, right? You know, what has the UN done in close to 80 years now since it was first created? So I think it's about time that someone came up with a better idea for world peace, and maybe this is it. Maybe this is it. We'll have to wait and see. Okay. All right, let's see. Where shall we go next? Well, okay. Shall we go to China already? All right, yeah, let's do that. Okay. Okay, so President Trump mentioned recently that he's talking to China about the arms sale to Taiwan. And this has caused some concern because does it mean that Taiwan is becoming a negotiating card that Trump is just going to use in his dealings with China? And AP has a story on this, and I think it's not surprising that there is this kind of concern coming out. So let's take a look at what this is about. U.S. President Donald Trump's comment that he is discussing potential arms sales to Taiwan with Chinese President Xi Jinping is raising concerns in Taipei as the island democracy relies on U.S. backing in the face of China's territorial claims. On Monday, Trump told journalists he is discussing the potential sales with the Chinese leader, an unexpected statement that experts say might violate decades-old foreign policy principles defining the United States' relationship with self-ruled Taiwan. I'm talking to him about it. We had a good conversation and we'll make a determination pretty soon, Trump said when asked about Xi's opposition to the arms sales. He added that he has a very good relationship with President Xi. His comments have stirred debate among some experts and politicians about whether this signals a potential change in U.S. policy toward Taiwan ahead of Trump's planned visit to China in April. If China says to Trump, well, if you're going to be selling arms to Taiwan, then we don't want you to come, then what is Trump's response going to be? Is he going to say, okay, well, in that case, I'll just not approve this, let's say, I'll not give the final approval? That would be disastrous. That would mean that basically the United States is pulling the rug out from under Taiwan. And China would certainly be, Xi Jinping would certainly be much more motivated to go ahead with an invasion, or let's say an attempted invasion of Taiwan, with the calculation that the United States is no longer really all that interested in supporting Taiwan militarily. So it's a very dangerous moment right now where President Trump has taken himself. And he didn't need to say this. He probably shouldn't even be discussing arms sale to Taiwan with Xi Jinping. But even if he is discussing it, why would he actually come out into the open and say it like that? It's just a little bit difficult to understand. Trump consulting Xi about arms sales to Taiwan may violate the so-called six assurances, a set of non-binding U.S. policy principles formulated in 1982 under President Ronald Reagan that have helped to guide the U.S. relationship with Taipei, said William Young, a senior Northeast Asia analyst for the International Crisis Group. The second of the six assurances states that the U.S. did not agree to consult with the People's Republic of China on arms sales to Taiwan. That's pretty clear, isn't it? That basically has been executed by several U.S. presidents after Ronald Reagan to justify and continue the arms sales to Taiwan without actually discussing the topic with China over the past few decades, Yang said. He added that Trump may be creating a dangerous precedent, allowing for Beijing to make demands regarding U.S. arms sales to Taiwan. Yes, I think this is true. This is true. Taiwan's government, which is observing a week-long Lunar New Year holiday, has not reacted to Trump's statements. The tensions are rooted in China's claim over Taiwan, which China says needs to be annexed by force if necessary. Beijing prohibits any country it has diplomatic relations with from having formal ties with Taipei and regularly sends warships and military aircraft near the island. Despite not having official ties with Taiwan, the U.S. is the island's biggest informal backer and arms supplier. It is obligated by domestic law to provide Taiwan with sufficient hardware to deter any armed attack from the mainland. In December, the Trump administration announced a record-breaking arms sales package to Taiwan worth more than $11 billion. And China bristled at the deal in a phone conversation with Trump earlier this month. She warned that the U.S. must handle the issue of arms sales to Taiwan with prudence. She also stressed that the Taiwan question is the most important issue in China-U.S. relations, according to a readout of their call published by the Chinese Foreign Ministry. In the absence of formal diplomatic relations with Taiwan, U.S. policies toward the self-ruled island are based on three pillars, said Lev Nachman, a political science professor at National Taiwan University. The first pillar, and the only one that's been formalized into law, is the Taiwan Relations Act. It was passed by Congress in 1979, the year the U.S. established formal diplomatic relations with China and severed ties with Taiwan under Jimmy Carter, right? It was 1972, 1979 was under Jimmy Carter. And this was a part of the incredible expansion of communist influence around the world during the 4 years of the Carter administration. The act binds the U.S. to provide Taiwan with the means to defend itself while regarding all threats to the island as a security concern. Secondly, the three communiques are three sets of statements by the U.S. and Chinese governments in the 1970s and 80s that cover a variety of topics, including Taiwan. Through the communiques, the U.S. acknowledges that there is only one China without recognizing Beijing's sovereignty over Taiwan. So basically, the U.S. is saying there's only one China without actually, saying which China is the real one. But the U.S. has diplomatic relations with the government of Beijing, not with Taipei. But there is a kind of a de facto embassy. It's not called an embassy, but it's a sort of a cultural association or something like that. The three communiques form the basis of U.S. strategic ambiguity on Taiwan, leaving the U.S. with room to support the island while not breaking its diplomatic agreements with China. Finally, the six assurances were formulated as a means to reassure Taiwan of continued U.S. support, and they are believed to have been upheld by all U.S. presidents since Reagan. Trump's comments give the impression that China may have a say in the quantity of arms sales to Taiwan, said Hu Tiangbun, an associate professor of international relations at Nanyang Technical University in Singapore. Even if eventually the U.S. will approve whatever arms sales package to Taiwan, it is a disturbing development, particularly from the perspective of Taiwan, because it sounds like it would be an issue that would be bargained away, Hu said. Trump is set to make his first trip to China in his current term in April, and Taiwan likely will feature prominently during his meetings with Xi, along with issues such as trade and access to advanced technologies. Uncertainty about whether Trump will address the issue of arms sales to Taiwan during his visit is set to amplify skepticism on the island about whether the U.S. would intervene in a potential Chinese attack, Yang said. And this only plays into the hands of the opposition in Taiwan, in my opinion, because the opposition will say, see, we need to make nice with Beijing, because if there's a war, the United States is not going to help us. So we need to do everything we can to avoid a war. And we need to go by the principle that a bad peace is better than any war. So Trump actually, I think, may have misspoke. Maybe that's one statement that he'd like to take back, and kind of has to now deal with the consequences of that statement. This further surge of skepticism and anxiety about the United States within Taiwan is exactly what China would be aiming for, he said. That's absolutely true, yes. The island's independence-leaning government, led by President Lai Ching-te, is already having a hard time securing payment for the existing U.S. arms sales packages, with the budget stalled in Parliament. Taiwan's opposition lawmakers said Monday that they would review a $40 billion special defense budget once they reconvene after the holiday on February 23rd, which will be next Monday. Okay. So we'll see. I don't know. And what is President Trump going to say about Taiwan once he does go to Beijing in April? I think there's a great deal of concern in a lot of people's minds, me included. Is he going to bargain away Taiwan? He says, okay, well, you guys can go ahead and take it, and we won't do anything. We'll just stand by and watch. I'm sure he won't come out quite that blatantly, but this is the kind of miscalculation that can cause war, right? One of the causes of the Korean War in 1950 was that the United States gave North Korea a reason to believe that it would not defend Korea. And this came in a speech by the U.S. Secretary of State at the time, saying that the United States was going to sort of draw a line from Japan to Okinawa to Taiwan and then down to the Philippines. And so Kim Il-sung looked at that and says, "Oh, look, they're leaving out Korea, the whole Korean Peninsula. They're not interested in defending South Korea." And so he went to Mao Zedong and Stalin and said, "Look, yeah, we got an opportunity here." So that kind of miscalculation occurred, can occur like this. And this looks like the kind of situation where someone can make a wrong assumption. And I think Xi Jinping is likely to make a wrong assumption. At least I hope it's a wrong assumption, but a wrong assumption that the United States is not going to defend Taiwan. So President Trump right now needs to come out and be clear on where he stands on arms sales to Taiwan. And maybe say that, yeah, we discussed it, but I told him to mind his own business or something like that, or something to that effect. Obviously, the diplomats will take that sentence and reform it in another way. But something like that, I told China, yeah, we're going to sell arms to Taiwan. There's nothing you can do about it, so just stuff it. No wonder I didn't become a diplomat. But it is a serious situation. These are the kinds of statements that actually cause wars. President Trump. He's a great real estate developer and deal maker and peacemaker in many ways, but causing a war is very easy. One word, one sentence like this can undo decades of efforts towards peace. I'm concerned about this. And President Trump needs to come out and deal with this situation. All right, let's see. Let's go to this one here. This is I've covered stable coins in the past, but I think we need to understand more deeply just how the world financial structure is changing and changing very quickly. Wall Street panics over $300 billion stablecoin takeover as crypto replaces cash. So the internet changed many things, and information, of course, and music, and videos, and so forth and so on. And that kind of change, shall we say, the democratization of finance or democratization of money, I think is coming to is coming now to financial markets, and the banks are very concerned about this because the news is not very good for them. Frozen international wire transfers can be financially devastating. When everyone debated Bitcoin's volatility, stablecoins, cryptocurrencies pegged to the dollar, mostly to the dollar, I think 90% are pegged to the dollar, not all, quietly grew into a $300 billion payment network that now processes more transactions than Visa. And other countries are developing their own stablecoins. Korea has, I think, is developing a stablecoin of its own, and other countries are as well. But more than 90% of stablecoins are pegged to the dollar. These aren't speculative tokens for day traders anymore. They're becoming the backbone of how freelancers get paid, how emerging market families store value, and how corporations move money across borders. Stablecoin transaction volume hit $33 trillion in 2025, representing 72% year-over-year growth that dwarfs traditional payment processors. Tether and Circle's USDC control over 95% of this market, but the real story isn't their dominance, it's who's actually using these digital dollars. The survey data reveals 54% of respondents held stablecoins in the past year, with 56% planning to acquire more. This isn't crypto speculation, it's people solving real problems. Corporate adoption tells an even sharper story. Currently, 13% of businesses use stablecoins for treasury operations and payments, while 54% of non-users expect to adopt within 6 months. BVNK, a major infrastructure provider, processed $30 billion in stablecoin payments during 2025, a 2.3 times increase that reflects genuine utility rather than trading frenzy. For freelancers and gig workers receiving stablecoin payments, these digital dollars now represent roughly 35% of annual earnings. Nearly three-quarters report that stablecoins improve their ability to work with international clients while saving an average of 40% in fees compared to traditional remittance services. That's not theoretical savings, it's rent money kept in workers' pockets instead of bank coffers. And this is why banks are very cautious, or shall I say, well, even upset about this. And of course, right now there's a law that they're fighting over in the U.S. Congress called the Clarity Act. And one of the main sticking points is whether or not stablecoin issuers should be able to pay interest to people who purchase the stablecoins. As I explained before, stablecoin operators actually have a fantastic business model. Tether, for example, has tens of billions of dollars of assets, mostly U.S. Treasury, not all, but mostly U.S. Treasuries. And then what do they do with those U.S. Treasuries? They sit and they collect the interest. They sit and they collect the interest. That's all they do. And so the cash is just rolling in. And so they have the ability to provide interest payments, shall we say, or some kind of payments. You can call it interest payment or some other, give it another name. They have the ability to provide those payments to people who purchase, who are holding their wealth in the Tether stable coin. But banks come along and say, wait a second, if you do that, who's going to keep their money in our banks? Exactly. Bingo. Bingo. Yes, exactly. Exactly. So this is the revolution now that stablecoins are bringing to the banking industry. And not only the banks, but also central banks, right? If stablecoin issuers are saying, okay, well, just you can provide us with your money, we'll give you tokens that, well, same as a dollar, then then this is going to make central banks irrelevant. So then that's the geographic adoption patterns reveal stablecoins functioning as economic lifelines rather than investment vehicles. Africa leads ownership rates and forward purchasing intent, while Latin America uses stablecoins as survival tools against inflation and currency instability. Standard Charter estimates that as much as $1 trillion could migrate from emerging market bank deposits into dollar-backed stablecoins, fundamentally reshaping how people store and transfer value globally. So $1 trillion from emerging market bank accounts, but people in the United States and Europe have the luxury of being able to sort of, at least today, maybe tomorrow, being able to trust their banks. But also, inflation is just a single-digit percentage point per year. But people in emerging markets don't have that luxury in many cases. And any sort of money that they put into the bank may be frozen like it was in Lebanon. Remember a few years ago in Lebanon, I don't know if it's still happening, but people were robbing banks in Lebanon to get their own money out of the bank because the bank could not release money to their customers. Or the situation in Greece, where some years back there was what's called a bail-in, where banks were insolvent, and so they took money from depositors. They literally took money from depositors in order to save the banks. This was not a bailout by the government, but a bail-in by the depositors, involuntary bail-in, by the way. So those kinds of people are going to say, well, let's not trust banks anymore. Let's put our money into stable coins issued by Tether. And of course, they're not really stable because they're pegged to the dollar. The dollar is not stable, right? It's also decreasing in value several percent a year. But at least compared to the currencies of a what are they called? Emerging market countries, I guess they're called now, or the global south. They're, the dollar is much more stable than the currencies in those countries. So this is going to fundamentally reshape how people store and transfer value globally. That is absolutely true. Regulatory acceptance is crystallizing this transformation. The U.S. Genius Act brings stablecoins under Bank Secrecy Act requirements, while Europe's MiCA framework encourages institutional participation. These aren't restrictive. These aren't restrictions. The recognition that stablecoins have become legitimate financial infrastructure requiring proper oversight. Stablecoins represent crypto's first genuine utility adoption at scale. Projections suggest they'll handle 5 to 10% of cross-border payments by 2030, worth $2.1 to $4.2 trillion annually. For an industry built on revolutionary promises, this quiet success might be the most radical development yet. Yes. So we'll see what happens, but banks are in trouble. They need to adapt or die, and we will see how they do adapt. And they're trying to do that. But one thing they're trying to do, of course, right now is to try and make sure that stablecoin issuers are not able, under U.S. law, to provide interest payments to their customers. But then, Tether, for example, is not even based in the United States. And I think they used to be based in Hong Kong. I think they may have moved to El Salvador. So will Tether simply ignore this and just say, okay, well, we're not a U.S. company, so we'll just not operate in the U.S. or something like that, and issue interest payments to people outside the U.S.? What will the U.S. government do about that? So it's a revolution that is ongoing, and as with all revolutions, it's hard to know exactly what the outcome is going to be, but it's going to be interesting. But we need to keep track of this because this is a way in which our world is changing radically, and old institutions, satanic institutions, are breaking down, and we'll see how this finally shakes out, and it'll be interesting to watch. All right, so that's our story that I wanted to do on stablecoins today, and kind of a hodgepodge today, not really one theme, but I now have a story on Venezuela that I want to go to. There's an author here that has been covering Venezuela, and he's talking about, or is it a she? I'm not sure. Talking about how much change has happened just in the past couple of months, just a month or just 6 weeks or so right now, right? Since Maduro was captured by the U.S. Let me see if I can try it. There we go. Okay. This U.S. visit was nothing like I've seen before. So a U.S. delegation recently visited Venezuela, and it was very different. It is less than 2 months, actually much less than 2 months, right? About 6 weeks right now, since U.S. Special Forces captured Venezuela's longtime authoritarian leader, Nicolas Maduro, during a nighttime raid in Caracas, yet it is hard to overstate how different the South American country now feels. There's a new buzz and optimism that, to be frank, I have never seen before. And who is this? This is do I have a highlight here? It's a CNN story. Let's check to see who's writing this. It's always good to know who's doing the writing. There's no name. Okay. Why is there no name? There's no name. There's no name on it. That's interesting. There's no byline. Oh, here we go. Stefano Posibon. Okay, there it is. It was hiding there. Okay. All right. Thank you. So anyway, it's less than 6 months, less than 2 months. All right. Buzz, optimism. All right. I moved to Caracas in 2016. In the decade that followed, Venezuela saw it all. A quarter of the population fled, a catastrophic economic collapse. Crime rates exploded before gradually yielding in the aftermath of COVID-19. Anti-Maduro demonstrators took to the streets year after year, only to be overpowered by tear gas and rubber bullets. Yet through it all, Maduro ruled on, seemingly unmovable. Working in Caracas as a foreign correspondent during the most turbulent months of 2019, I often thought of this quote from the Italian novel The Leopard about the conquest of Sicily in the 19th century. Everything must change for everything to remain the same. In Maduro's Venezuela, elections, at least nominally, would be held almost every year. But while cabinet ministers would come and go, the man at the top, Maduro, would always remain the same. Likewise, the perma-crisis in the economy, which endured despite Caracas' introduction of the national cryptocurrency, the petro. So this was Maduro's attempt at a stablecoin, right? To bypass U.S. sanctions or the central bank's removal of 5 zeros from the national currency, the bolivar, to subdue hyperinflation. As recently as last year, it had seemed as if no crisis were big enough for the government to turn the page. Venezuela appeared doomed to repeat the cycle. What happened on January 3rd changed everything. U.S. Special Forces captured Maduro during a raid in Caracas and spirited him away to New York City to face narco-trafficking charges that he denies. In his absence, Maduro has been replaced by his former deputy, Delcy Rodriguez, now acting president, who has ruthlessly transformed her country's geopolitical outlook. After just 39 days in power, Rodriguez welcomed the U.S. Secretary of Energy, Chris Wright, as the highest-ranking U.S. official to visit Caracas since President Bill Clinton in 1997. I was there to cover Wright's visit. Here's why I think the changes happening in Venezuela now are like nothing I've seen before. Last week, one of the most surreal moments I witnessed took place not in Caracas, but in a Chevron-run oil field in the middle of nowhere called Petro Independencia 1. CNN was one of 3 international outlets invited to tag along as Rodriguez chaperoned Wright around her country to showcase the potential of what are thought to be the largest oil reserves in the world. The moment seemed straightforward. 2 leaders visiting an industrial complex, shaking hands, smiling for the camera, and making a nondescript speech or two. What I had not expected to see was Rodriguez and Wright traveling in the same vehicle with minimal staff. Rodriguez amicably switching from English to Spanish to make sure the secretary was comfortable, and the pair discussing the finer technical details of how oil wells work. Bear in mind that for the past 27 years, the United States has been Venezuela's arch nemesis. Under Maduro and his predecessor, Hugo Chavez, oil projects from Western companies like the one we visited were tolerated at best, but often expropriated, while the government pushed for closer commercial ties to Iran and Russia for political reasons. Politicians of all backgrounds would be uncomfortable speaking English in public because it was considered the language of the empire. In the past few weeks, Rodriguez has swept that all away. She has installed a new economic leadership that seems competent and thorough. She has abandoned the combative rhetoric to build ties with both the U.S. and European companies, the latter of which were granted new licenses last week, and more importantly, has sought positive relations with the few entrepreneurs that remain in the country. Data reviewed by CNN shows that in the weeks since Rodriguez took over, at least 7 tankers have left the port we visited to head to Texas and Louisiana. According to the White House, the U.S. is brokering the sale of hundreds of millions of oil barrels, profits from which are already hitting the street and calming the inflationary spiral to the point that Caracas this month felt cheaper to me than in December. Clearly, much remains to be done. Chevron claims the project we visited produces around 40,000 barrels a day, but its capacity is 7 times higher. Secretary Wright told us that political obstacles still need to be removed and that this will require time. But when I asked Rodriguez, she told me the two countries were working nonstop to cement a new energy partnership that she hopes will be long-term. This is quite the change from a woman who said in 2019 that capitalism is incapable of generating happiness. Just as our selected group was visiting oil fields on Thursday, pockets of students took to the streets in Caracas and other cities to demand the release of political prisoners, hundreds of whom remained behind bars, according to human rights watchdogs. Those were small protests involving hundreds rather than tens of thousands, but a sign that slowly but surely Caracas's repression machine is not as feared as it once was. Student protests have long been a pillar of anti-Maduro opposition, but the last time the democratic movement ventured out in the open was in January 2025. The previous July, security forces arrested more than 2,000 protesters in less than 2 days to quash the revolt after electoral authorities controversially granted Maduro a victory despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. This time, the protesters did not seek a confrontation with the police. Their leader, Miguel Angel Suarez, told me. Suarez, a 26-year-old political student, believes there is an opening now to reclaim the public space. We have the opportunity to test how far the repression is willing to go. The time to press for political guarantees is now, he told me. Other leaders in the opposition are also daring the government more openly than before. On February 9, Pablo Guanipa, a close ally of Nobel laureate Maria Corina Machado, and who had spent more than 8 months in prison, was rearrested hours after being released for leading a protest in Caracas. Rather than being sent back to a cell, he was placed under house arrest and could be in line for a full pardon if an amnesty law currently being discussed is approved. Machado is the undisputed leader of Venezuela's democratic movement, but she has spent the past few weeks on the sidelines, saying she trusts the Trump administration will push for a full transition to democracy and new elections once the country is stable and the economic crisis reined in. What I saw in Caracas falls short of Machado's ambitions, as Maduro's government remains in power, even if he does not. Machado has claimed she intends to return to Caracas as soon as possible, but at this point, it is unclear she would be allowed back. She declined to speak to CNN for this piece. Suarez told me he respects Machado's leadership in the democratic movement, but that he believes Venezuela must reach other tangible goals before being able to return to the polls. To rebuild Venezuela, Machado must be allowed to be in the country. All our exiled brothers must be allowed in. Political prisoners must be released. The political parties allowed to do politics. The electoral authorities must change, and there must be separation between powers. When we reach that, we can move on with the transition to democracy. Similar caution was palpable among several diplomats I spoke to. The consensus, at least among the international community, is that Venezuela is taking the first small steps towards democracy, but that it should not rush ahead. No haste, but not hesitation is something I heard from more than one source, most of whom asked not to be identified by name as they were not authorized to speak with the media. Throughout 2025, the growing confrontation between Maduro and the U.S. President Donald Trump seemed to leave no good options for Venezuela, sandwiched as it was between an authoritarian government and a threatened foreign intervention that reminded some of Iraq circa 2003. In the end, the foreign intervention took place, but was far less bloody than feared. And since then, the incoming personnel from the U.S. have been diplomats and oil executives rather than Marines. It means going slow. Nobody has toppled any statue of Maduro yet, but also avoiding the mistakes of the forever wars. What has changed is that today feels better than yesterday, and Venezuela believes the opportunity to make tomorrow even better. The change of mentality is profound, even with the obstacles left behind by 12 years of authoritarianism. Nobody in Caracas is fooling themselves. The country is on its knees, and a lot of work is required before Venezuela can be great again. But even the harshest critics must acknowledge the enthusiasm. Perhaps the most surreal conversation I had was not hearing a Chavista president singing capitalism's praise, or friends who have been out of the country for 8 years finally looking for a flight to Caracas, but a European diplomat who, after a long pause, told me, at least for now, we've got to admit that Trump got this one right. Coming from a European diplomat, that is something, isn't it? That may be the most surreal statement that we've seen. Boy, it must have really pained him to have to say that. The European diplomat who, after a long pause, oh my goodness, at least for now, we've got to admit that Trump got this one right. Mhm. And I think Trump is getting a lot more right, and the Europeans are going to have to admit it at some point. Yeah, but well, good. Glad to see that things are getting better in Venezuela. But we'll see how the oil companies go in there. Um, you know, things are going in a good direction, I guess, right now. But the globalists, I'm sure, will try to make something of it and try to pursue their interests there. And that has to be a concern. But in the oil companies, what they're going to do in Venezuela, well, how much will the Venezuelan people be able to share in the wealth that is coming out of the ground there? This is kind of the curse of natural resources, and we see this quite often in Africa, of course, where the fact that a country has natural resources such as oil or gold or diamonds actually turns out to be a curse rather than a blessing for the country and the people living in that country. I hope that President Trump can make it so that the oil in Venezuela turns out to be a blessing for the people of Venezuela and not a curse as it has been until now. Situation with the natural resources, especially as natural resources become more and more important for more and more important, and countries are fighting over natural resources more and more. Here's a headline that may be interesting. Prince Andrew, former Prince Andrew, has been arrested amid Epstein revelations. See what this specifically is about. He's a private citizen now, so. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, the former British prince who was stripped of his royal titles, was arrested Thursday, his birthday, on suspicion of misconduct in public office. And while he has consistently denied any wrongdoing in connection with his friendship with Epstein, concerns about Mountbatten Windsor's links to the late financier. Come on. This is the second time Newsmax has referred to Epstein as a financier. He's not a financier. Come on. He's a blackmailer. He's a pedophile. He was basically running a theme park for corrupt elites. He's the Walt Disney of the corrupt elite world. But don't call him a financier. Anyway, Thames Valley Police said that a man in his 60s from Norfolk in eastern England was arrested and remained in custody. And this guy, Andrew, turned 66 on Thursday. After the arrest, Charles said that the law must take its course in the investigation of his brother. And Thames Valley Police previously said it was assessing reports Mountbatten Windsor sent confidential trade reports to Epstein in 2010 when the former prince was Britain's special envoy for international trade. So that could be it. Those reports stemmed from correspondence between the two men that was among the millions of pages of documents from the U.S. Justice Department's investigation. Okay. And so, of course, we've seen the photographs that were online. Okay. All right. So we'll see how that develops. All right. Gotta go. Well, thank you for joining me today, and appreciate your coming to this channel. These reports become private as soon as on Rumble and on Twitch they last for a couple of weeks, but I'm also uploading them to YouTube. And so this particular one today will be uploaded to YouTube within the next hour. It takes time to go through the process, but usually it takes 40 minutes to an hour. So if you want to go there and subscribe to that, I appreciate it. It's my personal YouTube channel. And what is it? Timothy Elder, followed by some number that I can't remember. I'm sorry. Look for Timothy Elder. There aren't too many out there. All right. God bless, Godspeed. May his kingdom come quickly.